So the guitar that has most definitively captured my attention over the years has been the Strat. I think the design combined with the history of iconic tones and all of the different players that have graced it over the years give it a sense of legitimacy that few, if any, other electric guitars have ever reached. And in wanting to learn a little bit more about that history, a couple of months ago I actually found myself doing research on the differences between how they made Strats back in the early days versus how they make them now. Just wanting to see how things have actually changed over the past 75 years. And I was so ready to go. I wanted to see all of the greats, all of the legends, to see how all their individual strats changed over individual decades. So I get out my computer and I decide I'm going to start in some of the really early days, and I type into Google best 60s strat players. And immediately I find this article and I'm looking through and they're mentioning all of the greats from Hendrix to like the Dick Dales of the world to the George Harrisons. But then I think to myself, I'm like, this is weird. One of the great 60s guitar players was Clapton and I see no mention of him. So I start thinking to myself, there must be some kind of mistake. On every single top 100 guitar players list of all time that I've ever seen, he's top 5 on every single one. And I've watched that Layla video 103.5 individual times, and he's rocking a Strat. He's always rocking a Strat. I've even played the Signature multiple times. So I start thinking to myself, maybe the writer of the article just made a mistake. If you had asked me to track down every single guitar player from every single decade, it's inevitable that I would make a mistake. So I'll give him some grace here. But what I'm going to do, just for my own mental sanity, is I'm going to go on YouTube and I'm going to look up some videos of Clapton playing a Strat in the 60s just so I can make sure I'm not going insane. So I log into my computer once again and I start looking up 60s Cream live performances, and one of the first ones that pops up is Sunshine of Your Love, and I'm like, that riff is such a classic. Let me click on this, and not 2 seconds into the video I noticed 2 separate things that shocked me. First of which, I was like, 1, Eric had a lot more hair back in the day. Number 2, I'm like, is this man right here, who I've always associated with Strats, playing an SG? Now, I had seen a few different videos of Clapton beforehand in some of the early days, playing different Gibsons and different guitars, but the more and more I actually looked into his playing, I realized that he wasn't really known for being a Strat player until the 70s. I found that even some of the earliest videos of him explaining the woman tone were actually on an SG. And once I had that big revelation with Clapton, it was really only a matter of time until the floodgates opened for me to find all of the other guitar players that I didn't think historically played SGs that had rocked one at one point, and I was mind blown. We had Hendrix, Santana, even Kurt Cobain at one point. And seeing all of my heroes use it and all of these incredible guitar players actually inspired me for the first time in a minute to take mine out and to see again what actually makes this guitar so legendary. Whew. She is just as beautiful as I remembered. You see, this is my SG, and I've had it for about 6 months now, and at one point I was legitimately playing it every single day for like hours at a time. I can honestly say at one point I was legitimately in danger of potentially becoming like an SG player until I started hovering towards single coils again, because I was prepping for this big AC/DC thing, but you guys don't want to hear about that, do you? That was until I actually picked this thing up again yesterday for the first time in a while, and it all came rushing back to me why I think this thing is actually a keeper. So let me actually plug this thing in and show you. So oddly enough, the moment I really started to think that the SG might be a keeper for me, especially as a Strat player, was the minute when I heard the clean tones. I think every guitar player has expectations going into trying out a specific guitar, and none of those are necessarily bad. And obviously when you see an SG, there was one tone and like one specific sound that I was thinking of. Once I started to take a step back from that and really realize the capability of some of these pickups, especially coming from me playing a lot of different Gibsons that were only Les Pauls, and they were really, really full, which I really liked that pickup sound. But as soon as I heard the clean tones out of the SG, it was like you were still getting the fullness that you expect out of a Les Paul, but you get that brightness, and it's a really vintage, cool, clean sound. I think it was especially surprising because I never would have thought one of my favorite clean tones that I've ever gotten would come out of a Gibson SG and a one-channel orange amp that usually is meant for rock. But I really do like knowing that it's really all about how hard I'm gonna pick, because it's almost on the edge of breakup, but I can still get the clean thing with the volume pretty much up at 10. Now, the second thing that really started to convince me that the SG might be a keeper was when I really started to look into the versatility of this thing. And I'm not even just talking about clean tones versus distorted, but just genre-wise. I started to look at a couple of my favorite players, specifically one who I took a lesson with once like 10 years ago, Mark Lucas from N Stuff Music, where he was using an SG to play some really complicated jazz stuff. And I'd never really seen anything like that before, and even going into some of my all-time favorite players like Derek Trucks, where yes, they are playing blues and stuff, but a lot of their stuff like Midnight in Harlem is really clean. And it has this very pronounced sound, and you never lose any of that fullness like I was talking about before with the pickups. You can do almost anything with this guitar. Now, that being said, it's definitely not the most versatile electric guitar that I've ever played, but I was really impressed with how much it could actually do in comparison to like the AC/DC thing that I only thought it could do when I initially saw it and picked it up. Now, the next reason that really made me think this was a keeper, the third thing, is that you're getting a Gibson that's very, very light in comparison to a lot of Les Pauls. I feel like I'm trashing Les Pauls. I don't want to come off that way, but I do think you get a humbucker alternative that's not like 11 pounds. This feels very light, and also the fact that it's the double cutaway and you have all the reach. Now, if we're getting really into form factor and we're just talking specifically about the looks, which do matter, I do think I like the Les Pauls more than the SGs as a whole, but the Les Paul is about the most classic looking guitar that you're ever gonna see. But I still do really like this, and I like how, much like with the versatility aspect, depending on where you bring it looks wise, it's gonna stand out a lot more. So when I really start to think about the moment when I started to play SGs on a regular basis a little over 6 months ago, I remember that what I thought would be the make it or break it thing, like my big thing, was whether or not I was going to be more versatile than all of the misconceptions I had that this was just the AC/DC guitar. However, the more that I continue to get back into this thing and really play it, I realized that it's more than just the versatility that makes this guitar really special. I like knowing that it can do a lot of different genres, but there's a history here, there's a form factor, there's a really cool clean tone that I feel like I don't really always fully appreciate, even when I'm trying to push this thing beyond what I think it can be. And that's not saying I would bring it to every gig or every jam or every live setting. I still don't necessarily think it's as versatile as a Strat or a Tele, where I could bring it to literally everything I do, but this thing definitely has a place, and I think I'm starting to understand way more why I've seen a lot of people who use SGs as their main guitar and they're like, I would never sell this thing. And I think just overall, coming from a Strat player's perspective, in the grand scheme of the Gibsons, it feels a lot closer to a Strat or to some of the more single coils guitars that I'm used to, with the double cut and the form factor and the lightness of the weight, but also different enough with the humbuckers and the overall fullness of the sound, where you still know and feel and sound like you're playing a Gibson, but it's not as extreme of a difference as when you're playing a Les Paul, which I still do like. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what I think. What matters is what you think. So please let me know, when it comes to solid body Gibson guitars, are you a Les Paul person? Are you an SG person? What is your favorite? Let me know in the comments. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. It had been a long time since I had picked up that SG. I was literally, I mean literally, playing it every single day for like 2 hours a day back in December. December. So it was really cool reminding myself how much I loved it. If you want to know anything more about the 61 SG, the links are in the description. Make sure to check it out. It's one of the best ways to support the channel if that's something you want to do. Or if you're just curious about any of the other gear that I use in this video, say the amps or anything, make sure to check out those links. Also, thank you so much to all my patrons. There's some cool extra stuff that's on there. Like and subscribe if you had a good time. Most important of all, have a fantastic night.